Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me? So we're good. I'm supposed to talk quietly. So I'm to welcome all of you and welcome those who are watching us live on the internet. So we'll see how this goes. It's my pleasure today to introduce Dr. John Toso. I know many of you know about my love of Tanzania and the Bega kwa Bega project in Tanzania. So one of my friends, Dr. Jim Hart, said, there's this fellow, Dr. Toso, who's very involved in Africa. You should meet him sometime. He was singing next to me in the church choir, so I thought I should find out what he's up to. So he has a very impressive background, and so I will be a person of few words per my wife's advice and turn this over to Dr. Toso.
Thank you, Dave. A short bio on the table. I won't go into a lot of details on that. But while working in Tanzania, that was the second call that I'll be talking about. The group, both here in the States and the team in Tanzania, we covenanted together to have the same devotional every day. And this is my utmost for his highest by Oswald Chambers. So I pulled it out this morning as I was just finishing my notes, and I thought, okay, let me just see what it says for today. Well, September and October is based on missionary work. And I was stunned by this. You have no idea of where or how God is going to engineer your future circumstances, and no knowledge of what stress and strain is going to be placed on you either at home or abroad. Amen. So I would start with words that Huck Usgaard used to start with each of his sermons in St. Olaf. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. You push for there on your table, there's about a 2023 symposium for global health coming up a week from Saturday. My son is speaking, and he's spent 20 years working with the Johns Hopkins Public Health Department. It ought to be an exciting talk. Also, Dr. Aman from Salian Hospital will be speaking via Zoom. So please consider joining us in that. Thank you for inviting me. There are some high handouts on the table. They're rather self-explanatory. The title is Calling of, and I say of or for a lifetime. I'd like to start by reading the first chapter in this autobiographical book that I had of my work in Madagascar. This was the first night on call. So part one, the call, and then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, here I am, send me. Darkness thick as India ink. Bang, 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 bang. Darkness you could cut with a knife. Where am I? Sorry, Brian, there's something wrong here. Oh yeah, this is Manambala in southern Madagascar in February 1984. We had just moved out to the hospital compound from Tulanado, 15 miles away, after 3 months of initial language training. This was my first night on call. What a thing to forget in our baggage. But the hot, sweaty sheets stuck to me as I worked my way to the edge of the bed, and I stumbled around with my hand carefully exploring that inky black, looking for the bedstand drawer where there would be some matches and a candle. Bang, bang, bang. Okay, I'm coming, I muttered under my breath. I fumbled with the box of matches only to find it took 3 matchsticks to finally light the candle. This nationalized brand of matches was far cry from the ones from Sweden we used to use. Grabbing the drippy candle held with wax on a makeshift block of wood, I stumbled down the long porch till I came to the screen door. When I nearly bolted, this apparition suddenly appeared. In a blinding light from the guard's flashlight under his chin, illuminating Kutu's face, only accentuated the deep wrinkles in his face, making him look more like a gargoyle. And to add to the fright, the light also reflected off a well-polished and sharpened head of his Tundrui spear. I took a deep breath. Kutu said, "Mishimarari maf mianjanau." That means, there's a pretty ill one, very bad shape waiting for you. The mafi, very intonation. So it depends. If you say Mishimarari mafi mianjanau, that means if you get up there just in time, you'll be just in time to sign the death certificate. I soon learned the adjective depending on the monotone level. I ran up to the nurse's station with him, and I thought I'd make a difference in the outcome. However, the mafi was emphasized just a tad more. That would imply the patient was in a grave state, and I just might make it in time to witness the inevitable. Finally, if he accepted it even further, they'd be dead. Heaven forbid that one would ever mutter the word mati, which means dead, or fati, or corpse. You never say that about anybody, whether they're dead or not. So after closing the screen door in the nurse's station quickly to avoid letting in mosquitoes and beetles, I followed Kutu the 200 yards in the night without a breath of breeze and not a star in the sky. The frogs in the lower swamp had started their bass chorus, making it around, that would mean about 1 in the morning. Our footsteps echoed as we walked along the inner courtyard, disturbing the sleeping patients in their beds and their family members who slept under their beds on the floor, their cotton shawls tucked well over their heads to avoid the ever-present mosquito. So I entered the nurse's station, lit only with one small kerosene wick lamp. It took a moment for me to adjust my vision in the dark room, saw a young mother trying unsuccessfully to take her breast. The nurse had just completed her triage and vital signs and reported the infant was probably suffering from Toso muka, which meant basically malaria. I was dressed in shorts, t-shirts, and a sandal, and quickly found I was also being fed to the mosquitoes. It had always amazed me how the Anopheles had a propensity to attack uncovered ankles. Moving in close to the mother, leaving the infant on her chest, I quickly assessed this baby. Even in that inadequate light, and despite her light chocolate skin, it was obvious this infant was beyond pale. She was breathing rapidly, had a rapid, thready pulse, suggesting severe malaria-induced anemia and secondary heart failure. I had no more removed my stethoscope from my ears than I heard a shuffling sound from behind me. I looked. I didn't see anybody in the corner. Then I heard the shuffle and a small clucking sound, only to see in the shadows there was a rooster sitting on the dustbin at the nurse's station. I guess that was more acceptable than the large gray rats of the area. So now I sent Kutu out to rustle a lab tech out of his house down the road to get the blood work. He got back and went down, and I went down to the side of the hill to the generator house, unlocked the door, started up the diesel generator. One push of the start button, the lumbering giant coughed, then heaved into action. And after the RPMs leveled out, then I came to throw the power switch. An immediate sigh of motor as a doop as the lights also all the lights in the entire hospital compound came to life. Because as power was shut off at 9 o'clock, many in the compound didn't bother to turn off their switches, only to find themselves enveloped in a blaze of light in the middle of the night. Georges, the lab tech, drew the blood, and the blood that came out looked more like Kool-Aid. When the blood hematocrit was spun down, it only measured 11%. Now, Dave knows what that means. It's about a quarter of normal. I took a Kodachrome slide of it to prove to people this actually happened, because I knew no one would otherwise believe me. The smear showed heavily infected with malaria parasite, and after a blood transfusion taken from a compatible family and IV quinine, this infant actually survived, one of the more fortunate ones. With the infant stabilized and admitted, it was time to stumble home, and by this time, The stars were out. I could see Scorpio high in the sky, which meant it's about 3 or 4 o'clock. The rooster began to crow the first time in the morning. Manena akuhu vualuni. Now, anybody that grew up in the farm, how many times do the roosters crow at night? Do you remember? 4 times. That was the first. That's usually about 1 o'clock. So that gives you a feeling of what it was like to start out. Yes?
Can I interrupt you just a second? I want to do one thing. I want to pull this out, put it back in again.
Is it going to work?
I think this will work. Do you have it?
Let's see. Is this one working now? Working? Okay. So I'm talking about calling of or for a life. I think. I looked up the definition of a call. It's a cause someone to have a strong urge to choose a particular career way of life. But I think for call or calling in a faith-based context, it's more than that. So I want to come up with a few things that I went through the Bible coming up with stories of call. We all remember Samuel when he was left at the temple with Eli, and he wakes up and hearing someone calling his name, and he thinks it's Eli, and eventually after the 3rd time, Eli gets smart, says, "That's the God," and asks him, ask, "What do you want?" So God proceeds to tell him what he wants him to do. Then remember Isaiah in chapter 6, when he's brought before, the angel comes before him and he says, "I'm unclean." The angel puts a coal on his lips, and then the Lord says, he basically gives him a call, and Isaiah responds, "Here I am, send me." And then Luke, Jesus calling the disciples after they've cast their net into on the other side of the boat, came back with so many fish, and after that event, they all dropped everything he had and followed him. And then we know the story of Paul when he was struck basically by Jesus with a bright light and blinded for a period of time, and that was the beginning of the call of the most powerful missionary we've ever seen. But I think most of us, this calling of a lifetime started when we were baptized. I had a rather unique baptism experience. I was baptized in Paris, France, while my parents were studying French to go to Madagascar. And my first wife was 3 months, 3 months older than me, and she was actually there. So the two of us were at my baptism. But I have to mention the French pastor, Pastor Blanc, preached on the story of Hannah giving Samuel to God at the temple. And my dad gave me the printed out copy of the sermon in French. And I still have it to this day. Basically, I've translated some of it. Hannah went to the temple and gave her child to the Lord. Most Christian parents accomplish a similar gesture without knowing it when they come into church to baptize their children according to the order of Jesus Christ. On that day, they ask that the seal of God be placed on their children as a mark of possession. In some way, they come to share their children, and thus acknowledging that their children are placed into their care of God to be raised for him and with him. Happy are the true Christian parents who know and grant to baptism its true value of the commitment of their children onto the service of God. The service of God. So, about moving along quickly, it was the spring of 1983 in Long Prairie. I had finished residency. Joanne and I were settled into our little house in the woods. We had our 3 kids, had delivered by that time. Just shortly before that, a Tanjui pastor who had worked with my dad, and I knew him from growing up, visited us and said, not if, when are you coming back to help us? And I never forgotten that. Well then, moving on, there was some discord going on in Long Prairie. That I was on church council, as I am now, but they were doing a building campaign. And there was a lot of problems going on. I was deacon at the time, and it was very frustrating. And there were some issues going on in the clinic, and I was really unsettled. I was not at peace. So I drove home from this church council, and I said, Lord, I don't care what you do with me, but you gotta give me peace. Now this is if you ever put out Gideons, please be ready. So I walk in, it's cold. I hang up my coat. Joanne's upstairs looking at the news, and the phone rings, and my buddy Tim Reitz, who had worked in Madagascar and eventually would be my partner in Austin, called me and said, John, I understand we're going to be working in Manambaro, Madagascar together. And there was this long pause, and he said, are you there? That's incredible, absolutely incredible. So, within 3 months, we had sold our house, we had an auction, sold everything, we packed things, and we waited. The last thing we had to do was get a picture of Tina the day she was born so we could get the passport. And so we were on our way to Madagascar. Before I left, this is something strange that happened to me. I was driving down to the cities for some, I think, going to DGM. They were still, mission office was still in Minneapolis at the time. And there's a certain bridge on the way down just before, just after Avon. And I went across the bridge, and suddenly I was struck with something I cannot describe, almost like ecstasy. I was just blown away. Felt like it was just heavenly. I could not explain it. I have never felt it since. But I think to this day that was kind of a blessing, and you're going to be okay in what's coming ahead. So that was my moment of ecstasy. Now, Charles Dickens started out his book. It was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. In those 5 years in Madagascar, it was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. Dr. Reitz was there to train me in for 9 months. We basically were sent to rebuild this hospital, which had been quite run down. It used to be kind of the Mayo Clinic of Madagascar, but since it had been turned over to the local church, they didn't have the funds or the equipment to keep it going. And so here we were rebuilding it. When we came, any of you that's done any surgery, there was one scrub brush left in the operating room, and there was one curette for doing DNCs. There's usually a match of 5, and usually you have 2 sets at least. One curette, and that was bent. That's how we got started. So we got things cleaned up. Reitz then went back to the States, and within a week of him leaving, things started happening. The generator burned out. We had no power. The pump for the well got short-circuited. We had no water. And then the patient toilet, which had been built on the side of the hill, collapsed because of erosion. So we had no lights, we had no water, and we didn't have a toilet for the patients. So my first job was to dig a ditch to start a new toilet. So I have a picture of me digging a ditch, never getting rich.
We're going to try this one again. Turns out to be stuck. Here's your pen, too.
The pastor who was, Malagasy doctor who was working with us was single. this is hard to say, he had knocked up one of the public health nurses and then decided he was going to take upon himself to do an abortion at night, which was illegal. He didn't say anything. He botched it, and she started bleeding. And instead of calling Tim or myself, he took a car and went to the next big town run by the Chinese, and they tried to save her, but she died. So all those four things, it was just incredible. Then there was a lawsuit that came because I had to lay off some people. We were way overfunded, and somebody was in the what we call a union here, and they decided that they had not been fired appropriately. And that lawsuit went on for about a year, all the way to the Supreme Court, and in our favor, but I was the one representing the hospital in the Malagasy courts, and it's all usually done in French, but I refused to speak French. I spoke Malgache, and the judge was just laughing. I'd never seen a white man sitting there talking Malgache in front of the court. There were the usual things: malaria, worms, measles, tuberculosis, schistosomiasis. But then there were the good things too. We decided that a hospital in itself is not going to change the health of a community. So we started going out in a mobile clinic. I got the funds it came back to the States and talked about the situation to somebody in Arizona. He wrote a check for getting everything started for this mobile clinic, including a Land Rover. That had never been done in Madagascar. And the provincial medical inspector said, "I've never seen anything like this. We're going to keep watching that." And we found that the incidence of especially children dying in the surrounding communities dropped precipitously. We had a nursing school that we had credit with the government. So Carol Halverson Berg and the Keitlingers made an entire curriculum, including illustrations, finally got it accredited, the best nurses coming out of that school in the country. Then I was asked to start a mini residence. We had lots of Malagasy doctors coming out of medical school, but they had a lot of book knowledge, but not a hand knowledge. So I had a 6-month crash residency, teaching them how to do Browns, how to balance a checkbook, because they're going to go out to a clinic somewhere, how to do a C-section, and how to do an ectopic. I'll get to that later. During the time, we also went to Limuru, Kenya, where the Christian Medical Dental Society had a meeting. At that time, a group of us said, we're really frustrated. How can we get the story of what our needs are to the people in the US? So finally, out of that, I was asked to write a letter to some retired missionaries, doctors, dentists, nurses, and out of that came Global Health Ministries. Started out small and is now a multi-million-dollar nonprofit here in the Twin Cities. So in Manambaro, at the ending, I found out there was corruption going on. I found out my son had a brain tumor, had returned home, and there were Carol and the Keitlingers and we, Mackenzie's the dentist, we all went home at the same time. It was just very frustrating. Looking back, Manambaro still has issues, but what I realized, the heritage, that the gift was the training I gave to those doctors. Every one of them are leaders in their work in Madagascar to this day. I never realized that was what I was called to do. Then there were the Austin days when we raised our kids and put them through school. My son had successful surgery for his brain tumor. I became the president of Global Health. I had a physician leadership college certificate course, Bush Fellowship. I became chief of staff. I never realized what those experiences would mean for me in the next call. This is mid-2003. We've moved to the Twin Cities, and Bob and Barb Griffin, they're watching, thank you, Bob, for that visit. So Bob and Andrea Wall came and said, we need some help. We're looking for a doc with missionary experience in possibly helping to set up and develop a hospital in central Tanzania. He left, he and Andrew left, and Joanna and I looked at each other and said, that's a no-brainer. You know, it was basically added, our children were out of high school, they're into college, and we called on the phone, I think it's us. Let's pray about this. And he said, no pressure, I'll send you and Dr. McKenzie, the dentist again, out to Tanzania and check it out. We did, we realized it was something we needed to do. So again, for the next 5 years, now I wasn't running a hospital, I was designing one and building one. That was really God takes ordinary people and puts them into extraordinary activities, and that's exactly what happened, and gives us the power to do that. Bob and Barb Griffin and Lee and Cynthia Griffin were our support this Calvary Lutheran Church, where we became their missionaries. And then there was a team of us, my wife and I, Janet Kenyon, who had been a nurse consultant in Madagascar before, along with Toso Boyo, another nurse consultant. And then we called Charles Rabe Mahefa, a dentist from Madagascar, to be a south to south from Madagascar to Tanzania. We started out building a dental clinic because it's quick. You can get up and going fast. And to this day, it is probably one of the best dental clinics in all of East Africa. Now, when you're designing a hospital, what do? First thing we did, we visited about 9 other big referral hospitals in Tanzania because we were told by the government we were going to be a referral hospital for Dodoma. And we asked the same question to every group. If you were to do this all over again, what would you change? It was amazing what the information we got. Before I left, Bud Hesterman, who was working with us at Global Health, said, I have a paper I want to give to you. It's been sitting here. I don't think anybody else has read it, but I think it might help you. A study of 6 former mission hospitals in India, 3 doing quite well, and 3 doing poorly, and probably we're going to close soon. This was written in 1997. This study was done under the auspices of World Council of Churches and released in Velour in 97. It sought to determine the factors that could predict the sustainability of a medical center. And as I read the conclusions, I couldn't help but jump and yell, Eureka! The author's conclusions mirrored my exact experiences in Madagascar. The major determinants in order of their importance were these: constructive governance. It wasn't fancy doctors and nurses, it was governance. Led by a hospital board whose members would represent a broad spectrum of the community that it serves. Importantly, church leadership would not trump the board. And I realized that had to be. Excellence in administration, paramount to including strict attention to finances and inventory control. Proactive management by the institution's leadership that would anticipate likely developments and plan accordingly. And a clear concept of Christian mission and vision for the institution that's operational so that everyone from the CEO all the way down to the sweeper understand why they're there. And then practice and mechanisms which help nurture the vision and the mission of the institution. And as we started planning this, we decided we had to do this. So we decided to plan a hospital like Kilimanjaro Christian Medical Center. It's a Christian institution with its own governance. It's not run by any particular church. We had a lot of pushback from the Lutheran Church, even to this day. In fact, it's gone into court. But we still managed to stick to the guns that we are a Christian institution and the governance has to be broad from the community, and it works. Then there was finding an architect, getting bids from contractors, the overseeing of it. I'll give you one brief example of what I ended up having to do. This Chinese firm was building our dental clinic, and the guard came to me one day. They had laid the foundation about a day before. Doctor, you got to get out here quick. And I went, and they had not properly laid the type of rock that you need underneath the foundation, and so the concrete was starting to sink in pools. So they were quickly trying to fill in with some more concrete, and this wasn't going to work. So I called up the architect in Dar es Salaam and said, put a stop to this. And so they did. Then they were going to take it apart by cold chisel. And I said, no, this will take a year to do this. Go rent the jackhammer. So that's the kind of work I ended up doing, finding them doing sheetrocking and not using any tape. And I said, no. I said, you don't, you need, and well, this is the way we do it. I said, no, but this isn't the way we're going to do it. We're going to get some tape. They hadn't decided, they didn't have enough, so they were going to do without. Anyway, during this time, Joanne's myelofibrosis became increasingly difficult to manage overseas. So she moved back to the States on the 4th year, and I was solo at the time. It just became increasingly difficult. Then I got conflict with one of the board members who used to be a member of Parliament, and she just kind of wanted to run the show, and I wasn't going to put up with it. So I resigned in 2007. Joanne died in 2015. But the hospital, with the founding documents and the mission and vision, to this day, it's doing well. They have it's totally Tanzanian run. They have a Tanzanian physician who came out of retirement to help run this place. It's really, outside of capital expenses, they're close to paying for the daily expenses, which is very unusual. So I think back to these two calls, and in retrospect, I realized I went to Manambaro not knowing what I was to do, and that was to train leaders. And Dodoma Christian Medical Center, again, I thought I was indispensable. After 5 years, I found out I wasn't. Things are doing just fine, thank you, Bob. One of the things that when we did the planning, when we came, how many of you have been to Dodoma or gone through Dodoma? Have you been through Dodoma? Nobody really, at that time, went to Dodoma. They went through Dodoma to get somewhere else. However, we knew when we were doing this planning, it's right smack on the north-south major Pan-African highway and the east one that goes from the coast to Rwanda. They're right smack in the center. Plus, the president had said, this is going to be the parliamentary seat. And lo and behold, in the last couple of years, it is now the full parliamentary seat. The place is exploding, and we knew it. So we were planning for this from the beginning. When I came back to see, after Joanne died, I visited shortly, and the president of the Dodoma Medical Center board said to me, John, what is awaiting you in God's kingdom's work? I still haven't the answer for that one. Either God has chosen to be quiet, or I'm not attentive. I don't know. But I've decided it's time to rest. I do some writing. We do a lot of traveling, writing some books. But it's, you know, I have found 2 times when things I start getting not at peace and ill at rest, I have to get my antennas, because that's about the time God's going to be calling me on something. And I think God calls each one of us in a different way and in a unique way. And I think that I'd be curious now to open it up. What kind of calling, how did it happen to each of you as far as a calling for your life's work? As far as, before I do that though, I'd like to read this as a closing. But now thus says the Lord, he who created you, O Jacob, he who formed you, O Israel, Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. And when you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. So I open up for questions or comments. What's that?
So this will get a little more exciting because we're trying to broadcast and we have one mic. So if someone wants to talk, please come up and we'll turn this over to you and you'll get your time on wherever we are, Facebook, our website, etc. So questions, comments?
I have a fun story about the beginning of my musical calling in the church.
Want to say it again?
So this is a total God thing in my life. We moved from Minneapolis to Indianapolis with a 4-week-old, a 3-year-old, and a 5-year-old, with one car, and Paul starting this new business. And leaving all the family, and imagine 3 little ones with, you can imagine how tough it was. And I'd left a church job here in Minneapolis, but thought with this young family, I can't work in the church. I mean, I have to take care of these kids and do my other work. So my sister-in-law was visiting, helping us getting settled in our new home. And she and my husband took the kids. I stayed home with the baby. They went to a Lutheran church. And my sister-in-law said, "You need to visit Pilgrim Lutheran. I think you're going to love this church." So we went to Pilgrim Lutheran, and the pastor there, and this is where I cannot believe it. The music director suddenly resigned at this church. And the pastor came and visited, knew my background. And it turned out that he grew up on a farm next to my grandfather's farm. Who knows Wheaton, Minnesota, and his grandpa and my grandpa farmed next to each other. And he said, "Would you consider just stepping in?" And I thought, oh, yes, I will, yes, I will do this. And I was there 13 years. So I didn't intend it, but it happened.
So next, questions, comments? While you're thinking of one, I'll give you my bega qua bega, shoulder-to-shoulder Iringa, Tanzania story. St. Paul Area Synod had this big project going on for a decade or two, and Emmanuel was involved in a token manner. So Don and Eunice Fultz came over and said, "Are you guys in or are you guys out?" And my wife happened to be at the meeting, and so she came home and said, "This really looks interesting, and we should consider going." And so we made plans, along with, I think, 5 other people, of making the trip. The central part of this project is to go and see, and the rest will, you will find the rest of the story after you've been there. So we made our plans, I got my shots, and everybody else dropped out. I said, "I had my shots, I'm going." So we went and were kind of given the grand tour by Don and Eunice Fultz, who were also wildly inspiring, along with John Toso. And we fell in love with the people and the project, and so now if they have a need, question is, are we going to do that? The question is, how are we going to listen to them and go from there? And so it is indeed a life-changing experience. So next, questions, comments?
Jan reminded me to tell you what global health is all about. Global health interprets medical missions for the Lutheran healthcare overseas globally. It also provides funding for projects. An example is that the Haidam Hospital in Tanzania, thieves stole their big diesel generator. And again, you know what that means for a hospital. They contacted Global Health, this is back at earlier days, and within 2 weeks, we had not only purchased a generator in Nairobi, but I had it installed, paid fully. We support the nursing programs one example is the one in Madagascar. We send out supplies, durable medical supplies, 20 to 25 40-foot sea containers a year. And we depend a lot on congregations to help do the packing. We also depend on volunteers to do the sorting of all this equipment. This is what Jan and I do every Tuesday morning. It's a delight. We really have a hard time missing that. So it's an opportunity, I think, for any one of us. You don't have to be medically oriented to know how to do this type of work. And it's a good opportunity for our youth. They want to come on a Saturday to help pack one of these containers. It's a delight, and to realize what happens. I'm going to give one example of a container. While I was working in the Dodoma project, we were home-wise, and we'd help pack food for Feed My Starving Children at one of the churches in Edina. Then we brought the food to Global Health, and that filled a quarter of a container. That container went to Dodoma, and by that time, when it came, I was in Dodoma, going around the roundabout, and I saw it. I saw the container. I knew which one it was. It's there. It's arrived. And so we arranged to get that unpacked. And then there was a famine at the time, and children were a very difficult problem in the area. So we called it not food, we called it medicine. So we didn't get a run on these. We had our public health nurses going out to these villages. Any child that was under the growth curve would get an extra amount of food, and saved it. So from packing it at the church to getting it overseas, unpacking it, and seeing it at the end, really a blessing.
So, next volunteer. While you're thinking of volunteering, next month we have 2 authors with us. Their book, The African Son, Abraham Boy Watson's Perilous Journey, tells the story of a man born in Nigeria and had various experiences and is now a member of Dana Nelson's church, Gethsemane, I believe. And he has a co-author who is a research nuclear physicist, I believe, worked for Honeywell, who now got bored and writes books. So that's the good news. The bad news is that it's the day before we're rolling meatballs, so we're probably going to change the date. So we'll get back to you on that. Following month in December, we also will be early. Dave Stark will treat us to his annual Christmas hymn sing-along. And we have pretty much scheduled the 2024 first part of the year. The dates that are confirmed: Bishop Patricia Lull will present in February. People from Keystone Food Shelf and Help Center will present in March. With luck, Larry Wilson will recover from his injury by May for his annual concert. If not, he'll have to play one-handed. And we wish him well. And I believe Shalon will talk to us about spinning and weaving. And I believe Gracia Grindle will talk to us about Lutheran hymns, but we're still working on those. So I will keep you posted. And please join us, and we will take it from there. Questions, comments? you like the microphone?
No, I want John to say something about the books that he's been working on.
So John, you've been volunteered again. The Lord is calling.
Poor Jan. Poor Jan. The voice out.
Well, I read some from that autobiographical work in Madagascar. That's going into second edition, which should be out by Speedwell Press by the end of the year. So it's been redone. I found a professional editor in our neighborhood 2 blocks away, and he's done this for most of his life. It's just delightful working with him. The year right after Joanne died, I spent a year journaling, and was kind of loose form poetry. I put the poems together into a book, and Paul Knockleby has helped me put it into a clean, concise book with nice graphics. That literally went to the printer last night. So that'll be available. It's small, it's very heartfelt, but when I went through the grieving, I went through looking at libraries, trying to find a book on grieving for men. There wasn't any. They're all written by women for women. And I thought, this is terrible. So anyway, so this is, as far as I know, the first one of a book written grieving man for grieving men. So it'll be interesting to see that. The third book that I'll be writing is an anthology, the boarding school that I grew up with in Madagascar. That's taking a lot more work because it's a lot of interviews and a lot of historical work. But that hopefully will get finished within the next year or two. So it's been fun writing.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Anyone else who wishes their moment in front of the camera? So that gives me the opportunity to tell you about Bega Qua Bega. So how good is that? The project continues to do great work. My own involvement is not medical. The project has a hospital in Alula, a medical center, and satellite clinics, and is very active. Those were well established and doing well before I arrived, and so I did not get in their way, and they're continuing to do their best. Seeing a lot of women in labor, a lot of car accidents, a lot of malaria. HIV is now no longer a guarantee of death. There's a very big HIV program, very successful. My part includes the Millions of Trees program. We have somewhere between 1 and 2 million trees growing in various stages. They're starting to harvest. We have upwards of 10,000 avocado seedlings growing, and we're starting mangoes and papaya for nutrition, for food for the kids, for another cash crop. I'm also involved in the radio Faraha radio station run and owned by the Aringa Synod, and I am charged with the Public Health Radio Hour and fundraise, contribute, broadcast when I'm there as a way to send out information. A lot of very important issues. HIV, a recent epidemic was an epidemic also over there. So of whatever it was, COVID, one of those viruses. So that's pretty much under control. There are several other projects. There's a water and sanitation group. There is a university. The biggest parts, however, are a huge scholarship program, actually several scholarship programs. One part is individual churches matched with congregations in the Aringa Synod for their high school students. Second part is a fund for high school students, for unpartnered congregations, because they're growing new congregations like crazy, and we are not growing a lot of congregations. The other huge project is microfinance that is very important for economic development. The person that runs it, a friend, Tom Henriksen, considers it by far better than our scholarship program. If he gets his people doing successful farming or business, they can increase their income, triple it in a year, send their kids to high school, build a home, help other people. So when it's good, it is fantastic. COVID caused problems with that program along with probably everything else. So they're doing some repair work. When they couldn't meet, it was a little hard for the process to occur, and people kind of got in the habit of not paying back their loans. Some of them because they had an emergency, and some of them because they didn't want to pay back their loans. So they're working on getting that straightened around, but it is a wonderful program. Each time we've gone back to Aringa, we marvel at this dusty village with, I think, one car in our congregation and an internet cafe which worked some of the time for communication to where it is now, where they had to get rid of the trees in their parking lot because there were so many cars at Mkambisi. It now has it spun off one of its satellite congregations, Sayuni, which is now ours, and has one or two other satellites. We're there taking pictures and videos with our cell phones. They're taking pictures and videos of us with their cell phones, and their best and brightest would fit in St. Paul just as well as being there. They're very articulate. Their English is excellent, and so they are no longer a dusty small village in the byway. They are generating plenty of resources. Instead of being an area that had to import 20% of its food, it now exports food, and so it is it's a miracle. So anyway, I love it. So we are nearing 1:30, and so I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Welcome to come back. I'd ask John to stay for a little while. Please look at his handouts. Please join us at the Global Health Ministries upcoming seminar a week from Saturday. Should be great. And thank you very much.
Thank you.